Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. This is the next in our Agency Master Series. Today, we're going to be looking at all about client rapport. Now, as usual, the aim of the session is to be kind of practical focused. Should last around about 20 minutes as usual, but hopefully it's genuinely useful and some stuff that you can take away and use straight away back in your agencies. Now, some of what we'll be covering today, I always caveat this, may feel fairly obvious, but it's also worth revisiting just to kind of reinforce that you're doing the right things. Before we start, for those of you who haven't joined any of our previous webinars or who don't know who we are, then my name's Steve. I'm one of the co-founders and a director at the Agency Works, and we are the exclusive implementation and client success partner of Synergist, which is the UK's leading agency management system. As usual, I'm joined by my webinar co-host, Kate, who's a principal consultant at the Agency Works, but also has years of experience working in different agencies in ops, client services and finance roles. Is that about right, Kate?
Yeah, that's just about right, I'd say.
Perfect. So looking forward to your insights on this. Okay, let's crack on there. Okay, so you've lost another pitch to an agency because they quote, they just got us better, or another idea was killed by a client who didn't trust the recommendation, or another relationship that went cold because you missed the early warning signs. So creative brilliance gets you in the room, but it's the rapport and influence that wins the work and keeps the client coming back. So it's not about just being charming. You need to understand what clients really need and build credibility that sticks. So we know that great works opens the doors, but it's the great relationships that keeps them open. So this morning, we're going to look at how to spot client cues that perhaps other agencies have missed, ways to build credibility when you're not the most experienced in the room, how to hold difficult conversations that strengthen relationships, the key to turning transactional clients into partners, and also spotting those early warning signs that perhaps their relationship is at risk. Okay, so client relationships. Every agency we speak to says they're great at them. But if that were true, then you'd never lose a client to an agency that you know you're better than. And yet it happens all the time. So the thing is, creative brilliance gets you in the room, but it's the rapport that wins the work and keeps the client coming back year after year. Now, there's a great Henry Ford quote for those of you younger people on the call who perhaps don't know who he is. He's a very famous car maker of the Ford cars, unbelievably. And he said, coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, working together is success. And that's the journey that we're going to be touching on today. So from winning work to making the relationship last. So the agencies with the best retention rates aren't always the ones doing the best work, but they're the ones with the most exceptional relationship skills. And that's a skill, not a personality trait, but you can get better at it. So how do we do that? So let's start with some of the science behind rapport. Now, research shows us that trust is built on these two things, warmth and competence. Now, warmth is friendliness. Do I like this person? Your competence is much more about capability. Can they actually deliver? Now, shock, you need both. But the crucial bit is that warmth needs to come first. So if someone doesn't feel warm towards you, they won't stick around long enough to notice your competence.
I think this is where agencies often get it backwards. So they'll walk into a pitch or a client meeting and immediately start proving, how clever they are with credentials, case studies, awards, and that's leading with competence. But the client hasn't decided if they even like you yet. So how do we build that warmth? So some of these are, well, most of them are pretty obvious, really, but you don't. So things like cross your arms, turn your body away, keeping your expressions neutral. Big no would be checking your phone, or things like dominating the conversation. Where your do's are making eye contact, using their name, leaning in, showing your hands, and smiling genuinely, especially on a video call.
And the most important thing, and very much something that's relatable to today, Kate, what's the weather like with you today?
Weather's beautiful today, thank
Is
you.
that right?
Down south, yeah.
It's something that we all do, and I know I'm guilty of it as well, especially on Zoom and Teams calls, especially this time of the year, is we default to the weather. What is it like? Is it sunny with you? I hope it's not raining. All of that builds zero connection. Instead, when we do the calls, we should be pre-planning this and thinking about what is it we can find that's personal to them. So maybe referencing something that they've posted on LinkedIn, maybe inquiring about a project that they mentioned the last time you spoke to them, or maybe just kind of noticing something in their office. It shows that it's a kind of a signal that you see them as a person, not just as a client. But the key to keeping the report right is around about talking less and listening more. Because clients almost never tell you what they're actually thinking. That's not because they're trying to be difficult, but because half the time they don't know themselves. So your job is to listen for what's underneath the brief, the feedback, or maybe a simple throwaway comment in a status call. So we need to listen on these three levels. So the first thing is actual words, the brief, the feedback, the request. Next, it's around emotion. Are they excited? Are they cautious, stressed, distracted? This tells you how to pitch your response. And then finally, the context. What's actually happening in their world right now? You can combine all these three, then you stop being an agency that delivers work and you start being an agency that genuinely understands the client's world.
Sorry, Steve, I was miles away then.
That's right.
We are live. And once you've tuned in, you start hearing things differently. So, can we see more options? That usually means that they're not sold on what you've shown them. So, don't just produce more, find out what's not landing. And things like maybe we need it faster. So, usually that means that they're under pressure to deliver results. So, find out what they actually need to show and to who. Then help them get there, even if that means reprioritizing what you deliver first.
So, okay, it was probably my fault for skipping a slide before you did your bit. So, no need to apologise. That was my fault. Anyway, okay, so now we're on to this slide. So now we're looking at digging deeper. So you're listening for those and you're spotting those cues. But how do you actually uncover what's actually going on? So this is more to do with empathy and skepticism. So it's about caring enough to dig deeper. Now, some of you might be aware of this technique. It's called the five whys. You can understand why in a minute. It's pretty obvious. But it's just about asking why and getting to the real issue. So, for example, your client might say, we want to rebrand, or why? Well, because sales are down. And why is that? Well, because we're losing sales to competitors. And why are you doing that? Well, because prospects think that they're outdated. And why? Well, because their messaging hasn't changed in 5 years. So now we've got to the real brief. And that fifth answer is a completely different project to the first one. Also, you can use terms like, that's interesting, tell me more about that, or what's driving this, or what happens if we don't do this. And all of these are questions that get you to the unspoken drivers that perhaps other agencies aren't bothering to find.
They should actually call that the toddler syndrome, shouldn't they?
Yes, or asking why.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
why not?
Yeah, indeed. So, but when you do this, you're actually building credibility. So, credibility isn't about knowing more than the client, it's about showing that you understand their problem. So, you don't have to be the most experienced person in the room. You just have to show up prepared, show you get them, and show that you're in control. And here are some simple ways to do that. So, first one would be to set an agenda, the goals, what you'll cover and how long it will take, and the expected outcomes. And that immediately signals that I respect your time and I know what I'm doing. Second one is stay calm. So when it goes wrong, make sure you stay calm. Don't rush, don't feel the silence, and don't react. So if a client throws a curveball, pause before you respond. Composure signals confidence. And ask meaningful questions and let them do the talking. So your job isn't about having all the answers, it's about getting the client talking. The more they talk, the more they feel understood. And the more they feel understood, the more that they're going to start to trust you. And if you don't know something, say so. Say, I don't know, but I'll find out by tomorrow. If you say that you know everything, clients can smell that bluff a mile off. Honesty is your credibility shortcut. And keep the conversations on track. So if the conversation drifts, bring it back. Something like, that's a great point. We'll park that and we'll come back to it later. And make sure you follow through on the small things. So if you said you'd send them a link, send it within the hour. If you mentioned you check something, make sure that you follow up.
Now, moving on to the one that most agencies dread, and it's about having those difficult conversations. That could be, excuse me, could be pushing back on scope creep, or it could be just flagging that, you're over budget on a project, or it might be simply just saying no to something that they've requested. Now, we know that most agencies avoid those conversations because they're scared of damaging the relationship. But by avoiding them, that's what actually damages it most. So, we know that the best time to have that difficult conversation is at the start of a project, not when you're halfway through. So we need to explain the risks, be clear about what happens if scope changes or maybe their approvals are late. And we need to set expectations up front so that when issues arise, they always do, then it's not a surprise. So when something goes wrong, lead with the problem, follow with the solution, and be transparent about what the impact is on delivery. So instead of softening it or burying it in the context, you start with clarity. So we've hit an issue doing X, Y, or Z, whatever that might be. Then immediately demonstrate control. But here's what we're going to do about it. And finally, we can address what clients actually care about. Here's what it means for maybe the delivery time or timelines or cost or scope. Now, that structure builds trust because it shows three things. It shows one, that you're not hiding anything, two, that you're on top of it, and three, you respect the client enough to be honest about the consequences. Now, most agencies damage a report not because problems happen, but because they hesitate or they dilute or avoid the impact conversation. Now, ironically, transparency actually increases confidence. Clients don't expect perfection, but they do expect control. So be honest, don't sugarcoat it. The key is regular updates. The agencies that have the best client retention are the ones that have the most difficult conversations early. So if we let it fester, then we know it could get worse.
And this brings us to the big shift. So, moving from transactional to a true partnership. So, a transactional client sends briefs, you deliver the work, and they pay the invoices. A client partner calls you when they're thinking through a problem before there's even a brief. So here's what a partnership looks like in practice. So things like proactive thinking. So don't wait for the brief. Send them an article that is relevant to their sector or flag a competitor move that they might not have spotted. Bring a rough idea to the catch up that you've been thinking about. It doesn't have to be polished. It just needs to show that you're thinking about their business when they're not paying you to do so. And commercial awareness. So understand how their business makes money. So know their targets, their pressures, their board priorities. When you can tie your creative recommendations back to their commercial goals, you then become indispensable. And strategic honesty. So we touched on this with difficult conversations, but it goes further. So a true partner tell the client what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And finally, make them look good. So this is the secret weapon. So understand who they report to, what metrics matter to them, and what would make their boss say, great call hiring that agency. So when your client looks brilliant internally, they're never going to leave you.
You hope.
Indeed.
And the last one, and this is pretty crucial, spotting when a relationship is going cold before it's too late. So the biggest one, and we all come across this, ghosting, or maybe you get slower replies or shorter emails, or maybe there's less context in their briefs. But when a client stops explaining the why behind a request, they've mentally downgraded you from a partner to a supplier. Maybe skipping catch-ups. Let's skip this week and, nothing to update. Well, once is fine. Twice might be a pattern. Three times might be more of a red flag. Or maybe new people appearing in meetings who you haven't been introduced to properly. That's often someone evaluating you or your replacement being lined up. Feedback becomes purely functional. That's fine, go ahead. Instead of like, we love this, what about X, Y, Z? So when the enthusiasm disappears, the relationship is cooling. And the classic, we're just reviewing our agency arrangements. So by the time you hear that sentence, you're probably already 6 months too late.
So, what do you do when you spot these signs? So, address it head on. Don't hope that it goes away because it won't. So, first of all, we want to name it. Have the conversation internally with your team. Don't pretend it's not happening. And then we want to diagnose it. So, what's changed? Maybe there's new stakeholders, maybe a project didn't land well, budget pressures on their side, maybe. You need to understand that root cause before you can fix on it. Then act on it. Don't wait for a scheduled review. Pick up the phone and be direct. I want to make sure that we're delivering what you need. Is there anything we could be doing differently? Something like that. And then track it. So if your client relationship health is invisible, you've got a structural problem. Make it visible, make it part of your team conversations.
Good advice. Okay, well, so we've covered quite a bit there in the last kind of 15, 16 minutes or so. As usual, we'd like to leave you with our three key takeaways from today's session.
So, first up is warmth first, then competence. So, creative brilliance gets you in the room, but trust decides who stays there. So, clients don't choose the smartest agency in the pitch, they'll choose the one that feels the safest. Warmth doesn't mean being charming, it means showing you understand their pressure, not just their brief, acknowledging risk before they raise it, listening beyond that surface answer, and demonstrating that you care about their world, not just your work. Competence without warmth feels arrogant, whereas warmth without competence feels risky. But warmth first creates that psychological safety, and once the client feels safe, they're far more open to your expertise. When ideas get killed, it's rarely because they're not good, it's because the client doesn't feel safe backing them. And safety starts with that rapport.
And second, I think clients rarely say what they really mean. They say, no, we're not sure about the direction, we need to think about it, or the budget's tight, let's park the idea. But underneath, the real concerns are often, I'm worried this will fail internally, or I don't trust the numbers, or my CEO won't buy this. I don't feel confident defending this. The agencies that win aren't better creatives, they're better interpreters. They notice things like tone shifts, hesitation, changes in energy, who speaks, who stays silent. Digging deeper means asking, what would make this feel safer? What's the risk you're seeing that we might not be? If this doesn't land internally, what happens? So you're not just solving the brief, you're solving the politics, the pressure, and all the personal risk that may be sitting behind it. And when you solve that, then you become much more indispensable.
Absolutely. And last but not least, be a partner, not a supplier. So suppliers wait for instructions where partners challenge, clarify, and protect. So a supplier delivers what's asked, avoids tension, and keeps things nice and easy. A partner will flag risks early, hold difficult conversations, spot warning signs before they become problems, which protects the client from bad decisions even when it's uncomfortable. And this is where the influence lives. When a relationship goes cold, it's usually because you've avoided that hard conversation or you've missed an early warning sign, and you've drifted into that transactional delivery mode. So, true partnership means talking about performance, not just output, being proactive, not reactive, measuring success in outcomes, not in just deliverables. And when you move from supplier to partner, two things happen. You stop competing on price and you start being invited into those bigger conversations.
So when you think about that, spotting client cues, others miss, building credibility without seniority, holding difficult conversations, turning transactional relations into partnerships, catching the early warning signs, they all ladder up. So we know that warmth builds trust, depth builds influence, partnership builds longevity, and great work opens doors, but it's great relationships that keep them open. Okay, bang on time, 20 minutes. So we said it would be 20 minutes. Thanks for joining us today, today's session. Hope you find it useful. If you want to reach out and ask any more questions, do feel to drop us a line, connect with us on LinkedIn. The next Agency Masters webinar is all around timesheets without tears. It sounds interesting, and that'll be on the 25th of March, and we'll send out details of that later today, along with a copy of today's session for those of you who haven't been able to attend live. We also have our own YouTube channel. So alongside the Agency Masters series, there's also Jay's A Game and other lots of other content that might be of interest to you. Or you can head across to the Agency Works website, where there's also plenty of agency content that might find useful too. Thanks once again for joining us. Thank you, Kate, for
Thank you.
being a wonderful co-host, and I hope you all have a great day.
Bye.